Hello everyone and welcome to this video and this lecture in the hands-on large language models series. Today we are going to continue with our text clustering lecture which we finished previously, and we are going to move to another topic, which is the topic of topic modeling. So let me first quickly recap what we did in the previous lecture. In the previous lecture we started with a data set collected from ArXiV research papers and associated abstracts. ArXiV is a preprint repository where you can upload papers before it goes through the peer review process. We looked at the computation and language subcategory of ArXiV, and we looked at more than 44,000 papers. In particular, we looked at 44,900 papers which were uploaded here, and the dataset has the titles and abstracts of these papers. The main goal was to look at these 44,000 abstracts and to try to cluster them based on some common topics which are present in the description itself. And to do this clustering, we implemented a three-stage pipeline. The stage one was to take the documents and to convert them into an embedding vector of higher dimensions. It can be 384 dimensions, 512 dimensions, etc. And for this, we have to use something which is called as an embedding model. We also discussed about how to choose this embedding model in the previous lecture. After the first stage of embedding is done, then we have to reduce the embedding dimensionality by projecting the higher dimensional embeddings to a lower dimensional space. In our case, what we did was we started with a 384 dimensional vector, and then we projected it back to a 5-dimensional vector. And this is done using either principal component analysis, or we implemented UMAP, which is uniform manifold approximation and projection. In step number 3, what we do is we perform the clustering. And here also, as a machine learning or LLM engineer, you have two choices. You can either use the k-means clustering method, or you can use density-based approaches such as DB scan or HDB scan. We used HDB scan in the previous lecture. So when we ended previous lecture, we reached this stage in our code where we could take all the documents and segregate them into more than 150 clusters, as you can see in the figure over here. But we do not know what each cluster represents. We do not know the topic associated with each cluster. We manually looked at what each cluster represents and tried to say that, okay, manually it looks like this, or visually this cluster looks to be talking about this topic. But now what we want to do is that we want to take these clusters and we want to move one step ahead of it. We want to assign a label to every cluster so that it becomes easy to know what each cluster is talking about. This process of assigning labels to clusters is called as the topic modeling process, which is what we are going to understand and study in today's lecture. So let's get started. So first, let me explain to you what topic modeling means. It's not just assigning a title to a piece of text or to a cluster of documents. It's basically assigning keywords. So let's say when we look at the field of topic modeling, instead of just labeling a topic as, let's say, sign language, the techniques which we are going to look at today will use keywords. So it will look at a cluster of documents and it will assign keywords to those documents. Such as if we have a cluster, then using topic modeling techniques, the keywords which will be recovered will be sign, language, and translation. We won't just have one title associated with each cluster. So for example, if we look at one cluster, the keywords can be dog, cat, animal shelter, breeds, pet. A second cluster might have different keywords such as pasta, pizza, rice, recipes, cooking. And a third cluster might have another set of keywords, which is sport, soccer, basketball, game, and athletes. So traditionally, topics are represented by a number of keywords, but this can also take other forms in different methods of topic modeling. Today, we are going to look at a method which will give us keywords associated with every cluster. So the simplest approach to do topic modeling is to use traditional approaches such as latent Dirichlet allocation, which is also called as LDA. And these traditional approaches uses a bag of words approach to extract keywords. So for example, what this approach does is that it, let's say, looks at a cluster, right? And it looks at all the words in the cluster, and then it counts the frequency with which these words appear. So if you look at cluster number 1, and let's say cat is appearing with the maximum frequency, followed by dog and the pet, the keywords in cluster number 1 are more likely to be cat, dog and pet. If we look at cluster number 2, we look at those words which are appearing more frequently, and then we say that okay, these words appear more frequently, and hence this particular cluster should have these and these keywords. Similarly for all the clusters. And this is a bag of words approach. It's of course highly logical and one of the simplest ways to do this. But keep in mind that the bag of words approach does not really take into account the context or the meaning. It does not also take into account whether the particular word is special to that cluster or whether it's used in all clusters. So, for example, if I'm looking at one cluster and let's say a word comes up many times, but if that word is coming up many times in all the other clusters, it probably means that that cluster should not be categorized by that particular word because it's not very special about that cluster. We need to look at words which of course appear more times in a cluster but which are also special to that cluster, which means that they should not appear more times across all the clusters. And that's where a bit more complicated techniques comes into the picture, such as term frequency and inverse document frequency, which we are going to look at today. But keep in mind that the bag of words approach is a very logical approach, and it's actually the simplest and easiest way to think about the topic modeling process. So we are going to move a step further than the bag of words approach, and we are going to look at modern approaches. The approach which we are going to look at in today's lecture is this framework which is called BERTopic. So it's a modular topic modeling framework. We are going to look at this in a series of two lectures. In the first lecture today, we are not going to connect a representation model with the topic modeling process. We are just going to do a turn frequency IDF inverse document frequency based approach. In the next lecture, we'll integrate representation models on top of what we have built. So today I want to introduce TF-IDF and the modularity aspect of BERTopic so that you start to understand it from the very basics. At its simplest form, BERTopic leverages clusters of semantic similar texts. So remember previous lecture, we have already formed these clusters. BERTopic goes a step ahead and extracts topic representations from these clusters. Let's look at the steps involved in BERTopic. Step number 1 in BERTopic is the three-stage process which we saw in clustering in the previous lecture. The first step is to convert every document into an embedding vector. The second step is to reduce the dimensionality of the embedding using techniques such as UMAP or PCA. The third step is to cluster the embeddings using approaches such as DB-scan, HDB-scan, or k-means clustering. So the first part of BERTopic's pipeline is to create clusters of semantically similar documents. What this part will do is that it will create one cluster for, let's say, all topics or all abstracts which talk about sign language. It will create another cluster for all topics or abstracts which talk about computer vision. It will create another cluster for all topics or abstracts which talk about generative based models, etc. No topic modeling is done in this first step, just clusters are created. In step number 2, what we do is that we start the process of assigning keywords to every cluster. So essentially the main purpose of step number 2 is to model a distribution over words in the vocabulary using bag of words approach, like we saw in this figure over here. So let's say we take a document and we count the number of times each word appears in a particular document. So for example, let's say one sentence is my cat is cute and the second is that is a cute dog. So let's say if these two are the documents in my whole corpus, that will appear a total of 0 plus 1, which is 1 times, is will appear a total of 2 times, will appear a total of 1 time, etc. So I count a frequency for the number of time each word appears inside a document, right? But the problem with this, and then what I do after that is that the resulting representation can be used to extract the most frequent words inside a document. But the problem with this approach is that this is a representation on document level. But remember that we have formed clusters which look like this. So why not take advantage of the clusters which are already formed in step number one? So then what we do is that we, instead of looking at documents, then we start looking at each cluster. So instead of looking at each document separately, we start looking at clusters as a whole. So we look at cluster number one, we look at cluster number two. Similarly, we look at all the clusters. So each cluster is kind of treated like a separate document. So one cluster can have many documents inside it, and that is treated as one big corpus. Then we look at cluster number two, etc. And then we try to do this bag of words frequency based approach. So for example, let's say I want to find out the topics or the words which keywords which should be used to represent cluster 1. What should I do? I will look at all the uh, words, let's say in cluster number 1. So in cluster number 1, let's say there are two documents, my cat is cute and that is a cute dog. Let's say these are the documents in cluster number 1. So I count the frequency of all the words which are appearing in this cluster. So let's say uh, that is appearing once in this cluster, is appearing twice in this cluster, etc. The simplest thing would be to just look at the words which appear the most and put them as keywords. So for example, in this purple color which I'm showing right now, that's the first cluster, right? Is appears the most two times and cute appears the most two times. So in a simplest naive approach, the keywords which I will assign to cluster number one are is and cute, right? So that's the frequency. So here this is called as term frequency, and this is a class based term frequency which is called c-TF. So I'm going to look at each class and I'm going to count the frequency with which each term is appearing. So the blue is the second cluster or the second class, and I'm going to count the frequency of all the words appearing, right? So one approach is of course to just use the c-TF for each class and then take the words with the highest frequency count in each class and have those as the keywords, right? But there is a problem here, as I mentioned before. This does not take into account how special the keywords are to the class. So let's say now cute here is appearing two times, right? So we might think that that's the best way to describe this class. But what if cute is appearing in all the other documents? Then the speciality of cute is reduced, right, for this class. So essentially what we should do is that um, we should put more weight on words that are meaningful to a particular cluster, and we should put less weights on words which are used across all the clusters, and that is very important. So along with term frequency, what we are going to do is that we are going to multiply term frequency with something which is called as inverse document frequency. And the way inverse document frequency is defined as is that it's the logarithm of the average frequency with which words appear across all the clusters divided by the frequency of each word. So let me write the formula down for IDF. So IDF is defined as logarithm of the average frequency with which all the words appear across all the clusters. So this is fixed, divided by CFX, which is the total frequency of each word across all the documents, plus 1. So let's say the average frequency is fixed and that is 29. This will be fixed for all the words which I'm looking at. Now if I look at that, let's say if you look at that, I'll count the number of times that is appearing across all the clusters. So in cluster number 1, that is appearing once. In cluster number 2, that is appearing 4 times. In cluster number 3, that is appearing 4 times. So the IDF score for the word that will be log of, if 29 is the average as which has been mentioned here, divided by 9 plus 1. That will be the IDF for that. And you can see that that kind of appears across all the words. So it's not very special. But now if we look at cat, if we look at cat, Even if you sum up the frequencies across all the documents, it's 1 plus 0 plus 0. So that is 1 across all the clusters. So the IDF for cat will be log of 29 divided by 1 plus 1. So the IDF value for cat will be much higher than that. And the reason for that is cat is special because it appears in only one class. So I should give more weight to it. If a particular word appears in only one class, it is more likely that that word represents that class rather than a word which appears across many classes like that. So inclusion of IDF also makes sure that overall we give very less importance to the, and, of, because they will appear in all the documents. So their IDF score will be reduced. Similarly, the IDF score for dog will be higher because the denominator, the total frequency is just 1. The IDF score for cute will be very low because cute appears 2 plus 18 plus 2, which is 22 times. So the IDF score for cute will be very low. So log of 29 divided by 22 plus 1. So the denominator is very high. So the IDF score for cute will be very low. So when we are looking at cute, for example, its term frequency is pretty high, but it will be multiplied by a number which is very low. So now there is a competition between TF and IDF. And then we will look at the TF IDF scores for each word within a cluster. And then we will choose the words with the highest TF IDF scores, which will be our keywords for that particular cluster. I hope you understood why we multiplied by inverse document frequency. It's very important to keep it in mind, and it's one concept which also comes up in recommendation systems. It's important to multiply by IDF because we have to put more weight on words that are meaningful to a cluster, and we have to put less weights on words which are used across all the clusters. Now let us see a schematic of the entire pipeline which we are going to implement for this text clustering process. So here's the schematic. The topic representation or the topic modeling is divided into two parts. The first part is clustering, and this is the three-step process which we saw in the previous lecture. First, you choose an embedding model, then you apply dimensionality reduction techniques like UMAP or PCA, and then you apply the clustering technique like HDB scan, DB scan, or K-means. That's the stage number one. And stage number two, as we discussed over here, is to implement. First you have to implement something called count vectorizer. So this is a scikit-learn implementation which calculates the term frequency in each cluster, and then you have to multiply this term frequency with the IDF, with the inverse document frequency, and then you get the term frequency IDF or inverse document frequency matrix for each cluster. So you have to get the TF IDF matrix for each cluster, and it will look something like this. If you look at cluster number 1, you will note down, or you list down all the words which appear uniquely, and there will be one TF IDF score for each word, and the words with the maximum TF IDF scores will be chosen as keywords for that particular cluster. So this is the whole pipeline. You can see 5 major steps or 5 modular steps in this pipeline. That's why BERTopic is also called as a very modularized framework. First you apply embedding, the embedding model, then you do dimensionality reduction, then the clustering, then the count vectorizer, and then finally you apply the TF IDF matrix. The good thing is that clustering and topic representation are largely independent of each other. So you can mix and match many things over here as a machine learning engineer or an LLM engineer. You can replace UMAP with, let's say, PCA. You can replace HDB scan with the k-means clustering, and nothing will change. The entire code will work in a very similar manner. That's the advantage of using modularized frameworks. So modularity is a huge advantage to a machine learning, NLP, or an LLM engineer. You have just so many options. That's why I like the BERTopic framework so much. So here is a three versions or two versions of a BERTopic framework. First, you start with an embedding technique. Then you can go to dimensionality reduction. You can use UMAP, you can use PCA. Then you go to clustering. You can use HDB scan or you can use k-means. And then after that, you have the count vectorizer and the TF-IDF matrix calculation. So you can build your own topic model as a ML engineer or an NLP or an LLM engineer in so many of these ways. But it's important important for you to understand, let's say, the difference between k-means and HDB scan. Understand that HDB scan has provisions for outliers, but k-means by default has to put or classify every point in some or the other cluster. That's one difference. Second, k-means requires us to specify the number of clusters beforehand, whereas HDB scan has no such requirement. HDB scan is a density based approach, k-means is more of a distance based approach. Similarities and differences exist for UMAP and PCA as well. So please keep those in mind. This is a hands-on lecture series, so I have not gone into the theoretical aspects of these topics, but we will have separate lectures for that very soon. As an ML engineer, don't blindly use any framework. Try to think about ways and reasons behind your choice of different modules which you are picking when you are using BERTopic. Okay, I hope all of you have understood this two-stage overall process and the 5 modules which are involved in the pipeline of BERTopic: embedding, dimensionality reduction, clustering, count vectorizer, and the TF-IDF matrix. Now we are going to go to code, and I'm going to show you how you can implement these 5 modules in a Google Colab interface. So let's jump into code directly. All right, so let's go ahead and implement the code in Google Colab. It's a simple code, but it's extremely powerful, as you will see. The first step is to install the relevant packages. So you'll need BERTopic for the modular framework which we are going to implement. You'll need the datasets because we are going to download datasets from Hugging Face. You won't need OpenAI or data matplot today, but you can just install these 2 packages because the next lecture will require these. These packages will be installed in 1 to 2 minutes of time, and then you can go to the next step. The next step, as I always say in any machine learning project, is to deal with the dataset and to understand the dataset. So we use the load dataset function from the datasets package in Hugging Face, and then we provide the link to this ArXiV NLP dataset on Hugging Face itself. And then you provide the key as train, because here you can see that the dataset here is named as train. And then you extract the data for abstracts and the titles. After you run this step, you'll have the abstracts and the title extracted in your Google Colab code, and then you are ready to do the next steps of the process. So as you see here, first we have to implement the embeddings, then go to other steps. So let's go ahead and implement the embedding. We'll use a sentence transformer uh, framework or function, and then within that we'll use this GTE small. So GTE dash small is an embedding model which we looked at last time in a lot of detail. It's provided through Hugging Face itself, is general text embeddings with multi-stage contrastive learning. It has 30 million parameters and it roughly takes 70 megabytes of memory. So you can load this embedding model, and then we will encode our abstracts with this embedding model, which means that every single abstract will be converted into a 384 dimensional vector after this process is run. This takes a bit of time since we are taking about 45,000 abstracts and converting each of them into a 384 dimensional vector. The next step is to use UMAP, which is basically take the embeddings from 384 dimensional space and project them back into a 5-dimensional space. So we'll create a UMAP model and define n components equal to 5, which reduces the input embeddings from 384 dimensions to 5 dimensions. And then we'll create this reduced embeddings from the UMAP model, and the reduced embeddings will have 5 dimensions. Once the reduced embeddings are generated, we have to implement the next step, which is the clustering algorithm, and we are going to use HDB scan over here. So here you can see that I have used HDB scan. I have put the minimum cluster size to be equal to 50. This algorithm does not require us to specify the number of clusters. It automatically finds it when we specify the minimum cluster size. In the previous lecture, I have explained an intuition about this algorithm. So if you want more technical details, I highly recommend to go through the previous lecture. After you run this, we'll essentially have a model, we'll have an embedding model, we'll have a UMAP model, and we'll have an HDB scan model. So we'll have 3 models. And when we then, the next step is for us to define the BERTopic, which is this final 2 steps, the BERTopic model. And here we have to pass in 3 models. That's where the modular structure comes into the picture, right? We can pass in the embedding model, the UMAP model, and the HDB scan model separately. You can replace this with k-means and then pass it here as the clustering model. You can replace this UMAP with PCA and pass it here as the dimensionality reduction model. So you can do a lot of mix and match over here. That's what I like about BERTopic. And here I'm showing you how to do that in code. So from this package which you installed at the start, BERTopic, you import BERTopic and then do BERTopic.fit. And then we have to pass in the abstracts and we have to pass in the embeddings which we had generated earlier. So remember there are three models which we need to specify to this function: the embedding model, the UMAP model, and the HDB scan model. Once you run the BERTopic model, you will see that the results are printed over here. So there are 3 points at which it says completed. First, when the dimensionality reduction has been done, here you can see completed followed with a tick. Second, when the clustering has been completed, where you can again see completed followed by a tick. And the third, when the representation, which is the creation of the TF-IDF matrix, has been completed, there it shows a tick. In the next lecture, we will actually see how to integrate representation models on top of the topic modeling which we are performing in today's lecture. So now that the topic model has been generated, we can inspect this topic model to reveal more information about our clusters. Remember that in the previous lectures we had obtained 150 clusters. So what we are going to do right now is that first we are going to type topic model dot get topic info. What this will do is that for all of these 150 clusters, we obtain keywords. Here you see for cluster number 1, the name is speech ASR recognition, and then there are keywords such as speech, ASR recognition, acoustic, etc. Right? And then there are the abstracts which are present in that particular cluster, which are also named as representative docs. But the main output from the BERTopic model is the creation of these keywords specific to every single cluster. So here you can see keywords being created for each of the 150 clusters which we have obtained. Now what we can do after this point is that we can look at each cluster and we can print out these keywords associated with every cluster. So for example, if we want to print out the keywords associated with uh, cluster number 11, what we can do is that topic model dot get topic and put in the cluster number which is 11. What this prints out is the keywords associated with cluster 11, which is image, visual, vision, multimodal, captioning, captions, images, modal, caption, and language. And here you can also see the TF-IDF score. So image has a very high TF-IDF score 0.03, and then language has a very low TF-IDF score here, which means that out of all the documents in these clusters, in this cluster number 11, almost all of the documents talk about image, whereas language comes up in a few of these, but not as much. Still, these are the top 10 keywords extracted from this cluster number 11. We can also do other things with this topic model which we have generated. What we can do is that we can use the find topics function to search for specific topics based on a search term. So, for example, if you want to search about topic modeling, so we do topic model dot find topics and topic modeling, and then it returns us the names of the 5 clusters which have a very high similarity with topic modeling. So this is cluster number 22, cluster number -1, cluster number 2, 45, and 30. By the way, if you are wondering what this -1 over here is, that it's the collection of all the outliers which were not present in any cluster. So the real understanding or the real inspection begins from this point onwards, right? That's important to note. So here what we see is that cluster number 22 has a relatively high similarity 0.95 with our search term. So what we can do is that we can then inspect this cluster. So like how we inspected cluster number 11, what we can do is we can inspect cluster number 22 and we can see the keywords for this. And indeed we can see that it has keywords such as topic, modeling, etc. And that's why topic modeling shows a very high similarity with this particular cluster. So you see the amount of things which we have started to do now after the clusters have been labeled with topic. So we can also do something like if we know that there is a particular paper which is bird topic, we can actually try to see. So let's say this particular paper titles dot index and bird topic. So if I go to my data set right now, this is my data set, and let me control F this to see if this paper exists in the data set. So if I control F right now, and if I type in bird topic, which we are learning about today itself, bird topic. So it's actually present in our data set. You can it is taking a bit of time to go through this entire data set because it has like 45,000 rows, but it is present in the data set. So what now we have to check is that we know that this paper comes under topic modeling. So we want to know that whether cluster number 22 also has this abstract in that cluster. So what we are going to do is that we are going to do topic model dot topics, and we have to put the index of our paper, and then it shows the number in which this paper belongs to. So this paper belongs to cluster number 22, and we already know that cluster number 22 is a cluster related with topic modeling. That's awesome, right? So we expected this paper to be under topic modeling cluster, and it turns out that it is. This is another proof or another validation that the code which we have written actually works pretty well. What you can do is that you can also head over to this and search for other papers such as Attention is All You Need. So Attention is All You Need is one of the most famous papers, and if you can, Attention is All You Need. This is a paper which is also present in this data set. So what you can do is that you can just it's again taking a long time to find it, but you can go over here and replace this with Attention is All You Need. So what I'm doing here right now is replacing this with Attention is All You Need, and I'm running this, and then it will print out the topic model or the cluster number which is associated with this paper. Attention is all you need. So you can also run this on your end when the code is shared with you, and in fact you can run it for any other paper which is present in the data set also. So here you see Attention is all you need is now found out after some time over here. And let's see. So topic model is not defined. That is because I'll probably need to run the code again since it's disconnected from the runtime. But what I suggest to you is that you can change the name here so that you can also experiment with the code. That's usually the best way to learn something. If I am showing you about one paper, you can try to put in different paper names over here and see the cluster with which this to which this paper belongs to. But remember the goal which we started with. The goal which we started with was, okay, I see these clusters over here, but can I give names to this cluster on this visual map itself? So that's what we are going to do now. In fact, we can do visualizations with the topic model which we created. And the function to do this is topic model dot visualize documents, right? Here you have to provide the titles which we have downloaded at the start right over here. Here we have to provide these titles, and then we also have to let me show you, we also have to provide the reduced embeddings, and what this will do is that it will essentially create this visual map for you. So now we have the clusters and we have the topic name associated with every cluster. So for example, if you look at this particular cluster, the orange cluster, here you will see every dot corresponds to one paper. So this is a cluster which seems to be something related to questions, right? Because everything is related to some kind of question and answer. So everything in here is related to question and answer. So if you see the orange legend here, it says that questions. So it's a cluster related to all the topics or all the abstracts which are about question and answers. Similarly, if you see the red, let's see the red cluster over here. So if you see the red cluster over here, you will see that every red cluster is something about clinical or something about medical trials. So on the red cluster, if you hover, you'll see it's always about clinical care or medical trials, something like that. Um, So it's probably about large language models or natural language processing applied to medical sciences. And see, the red symbol corresponds to medical, clinical, and biomedical. Those are the main keywords or the main topic associated with the red. So this clearly shows that the topics which we are seeing here make sense. If you see the green here seems to be about visual models, right? It's everything to do with visually grounded descriptions, visual question and answering. So here you see 11. So cluster number 11 is about image visual vision. And this is exactly which we had printed out over here. If you remember, we had printed out cluster number 11 here, which has image, visual, vision, multimodal, etc. And here I am showing you how cluster number 11 actually looks like. So here you can see this green cluster which I'm highlighting right now, that is cluster number 11. And you can see that it's about multimodality, images, question answer, etc. So that's why cluster number 11 has image, visual and vision as the keywords associated with it. So here we can see all the 150 clusters, and every cluster is now associated with a name. Isn't that pretty awesome? Now we took this 45,000 abstracts, we took their titles, we clustered them, and not just that, we assigned a name to each cluster, we assigned a keyword to every cluster, and now we know what these clusters represent. So if you are a student who wants to study about, let's say, medical papers in the medical, clinical or biomedical domain, you only need to look at cluster number 2. If you are a student who wants to study about COVID-19 pandemic and the natural language processing papers related to this topic, you only need to look at cluster number 62. So this is extremely useful for researchers and for a huge number of other fields as well. Now, there is another visualization which you can do, and that is called as hierarchical clustering. So, if you do this topic model dot visualize hierarchy, you'll get something like you'll get a plot like this. The way to read this plot is that look at this cluster number 11, which is image visual vision. This plot shows the other clusters which this is close to. So cluster number 11 seems to be closer to cluster 122, which is also about multimodality and visual processing. And it seems to be closer to cluster number 107 also, which is also about visual and images. So all of these clusters fall under the green category, and they are further connected to a larger blue cluster. So if you see, the blue cluster comes is related to emotion, recommendation, etc. So this means that visual, multimodality are the smaller level items, and a broader umbrella which is represented by this blue hierarchy or this blue arrow or the blue horizontal line, that is the bigger umbrella, which is something related to maybe emotions or recommendation, etc. So the hierarchical clustering map will show you which clusters are related to which other clusters and kind of the hierarchical ordering. So which is the superset, then which clusters comes within that superset, etc. So for example, here the superset seems to be emotions, recommendation, right? And images, visual, multimodality comes within that superset. That's how you can interpret the hierarchical clustering graph. There are other visualizations here such as the heat map and the bar chart, which I'm not showing here, but I highly encourage you to look at these visuals and try to understand what's going on here. This brings us to the end of today's lecture, where we looked at clustering and where we saw how to assign keywords and how to assign names to every single cluster over here. In the next lecture, we are going to look at representation models. So we are going to update our topic representations, and this is another advantage which BERTopic actually provides. So we are going to look at all of these sections which I'm showing to you right now. We'll also look at some generative models later like Flynt, T5, OpenAI, etc., and how they can be connected to text clustering and topic modeling. Thanks a lot, everyone. I hope you're liking this approach, which is a mixture of showing you on the whiteboard as well as explaining to you the entire code through the Google Colab interface. I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture, where we'll be looking at adding a layer of representation models on top of the text clustering and the topic modeling pipeline which we have seen up till now. Thank you.